Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. This was kind of for the ones who are not digitally equipped, as I was this morning, the program said that we would be here to talk about returnships. So I just want to be mindful, if anyone is here because you think you're going to be talking about returnships, this is not what we'll be talking about. The program has been updated last week, and we will be talking about leadership for the future world of work. So if no one is disappointed with that, we'll do that. Okay. So thank you very much for being here. We will have now about like an hour and a half to see how we as leaders can get ready for the future. A future which will obviously be very different than today, which is no surprise for any of you. And I will introduce you to the people who will be here helping you think through some of this, hopefully inspire you and leading us to take some action, your individual action, at the end of this session. Because obviously it's no need to think about anything if nothing happens next day. So I am Christel van der Els, and I'm the CEO of a company called the Global Foresight Group. So we help actually people to think about how the future might change and what that means in terms of decision making for today to get ready to take the opportunities or avoid the risks of those futures. Prior to that, I've been at the World Economic Forum, leading all the futures work there, the foresight work, and I'm also a professor in a number of schools like College of Europe and Oxford. Thank you. Yes, we're getting ready. I'm very delighted to be accompanied today actually by two fantastic people who are shaping the future of work. And both of them come from Virgin Unite. And the first one is Jane Ulwang, who you can find here. So Jane is the president of Virgin Unite. She has a very, very long standing career, very impressive. She was an entrepreneurial CEO of Virgin Unite, and she's a senior partner in the B team, which she'll be talking about. So since 2003, Jane has led this Virgin Unite organization, and prior to that, she was the CEO of Virgin Mobile Australia. And she started working in 2003 with Richard Branson and the Virgin staff from around the world in this Virgin Unite organization. Over the last 14 years, Jane has worked with her partners to create kind of new approaches to social and environmental issues, such as the Branson Centers of Entrepreneurship, a platform to support entrepreneurs. She's led the incubation of a number of global leadership initiatives, such as the Elders, the Carbon War Room, the B Team, and Ocean Unite. In addition to that, Jane has been instrumental in working with Virgin's businesses also around the world, providing impetus for positive change. And in her previous life, in her previous life, Jane lived and worked on 6 continents, helping mobile phone startups. She was also a partner in the Global Virgin Group with a focus on people and purpose. Jane has long explored the overlap between business and social sectors, and that's what she's been involved in. She has worked, for example, in the Foundation for National Parks and Wildlife in Australia, and has had a number of voluntary roles. She sits on the advisory councils for the Elders, Ocean Unite, and the Sarah Blackley Foundation, and she's also on the board of the Rocky Mountain Institute, Carbon War Room, the Elders, and Just Capital. So a long career between business, social issues, environmental issues, and working across those fields. And then we have Anna Goudrich, who has been leading over the last 3 years the 100% Human at Work initiative. She's also working on the B team, and she is the head of strategic people initiatives at Virgin Unite. She has, until December last year, Anna has led a dual role as this head of people at Virgin Unite and works closely with Virgin management to align the work that they're doing on people and purpose, bringing it back to the business. Prior to Virgin Unite, Anna held a partner's position at Hot Courses, which is an international educational publishing company, and she was responsible for advising on strategic human resource issues. Anna is also on the board of directors of Latimer Creative Media. It's a young or youth-oriented creative social media enterprise. So very much also in the field of the work between social and between business. Thank you very much for being here today. So what we will be doing here today then is we will be working really on your future leadership skills, hoping to get you some clarity and some insights in how you can be an effective and efficient leader, what it takes to be successful in the future, and to create environments for other people to be successful. And how we will be doing that is that I will first remind you, because you're all in this business, so I suppose you have some knowledge about how the future of work might look like, but I will remind you about a couple of elements of the future that we might be seeing. And then we will have some discussions around how the future is not only happening by the drivers that are going on, but also people are shaping the future of work. New things are happening, initiatives are being set up and are being conducted that will profoundly shape the way we work in the future and the way organizations are looking. Then we will get you to work and to have discussions around what does leadership mean in this new context? If this is the new world we're going to be facing, what is leadership? Do we need leadership? What's the role of leadership? What are the characteristics and skills that leaders need? How should we think about leadership in these new type of worlds? We'll come back a bit on that and we'll see what the different discussions have been in the groups. And then we will go from there thinking about, well, now we kind of know what the future looks like. We know what leadership means in there, get some clarity around that. So how we as leaders need then to start taking action to personally be a better leader in the future, but also to create environments that are providing for prosperous careers and other people actually creating a livelihood in this new future of work. So that's a bit of setup. So a bit of a presentation, 2 working groups, hopefully a lot of insights, and hopefully we'll get some great ideas out there on what you will change tomorrow. Okay? Good? Perfect. So, the future of work landscape. Very often we're talking about how work is going to be and jobs are going to be changed on the basis of technology. It's very often discussed. This is not obviously the only driver that's going to change the landscape of work. So there's a number of things. For example, urbanization. Urbanization is very often looked at as potential centers for innovation. Get everyone together in the right places. There's designs of urbanization around how can we optimize living and working in the same places. At the same time, there is a future that exists that we might see a lot of slums. So this will probably kind of shape a bit like where work is and how this is going. As we all know, there's a trend going on of increased inequality, which will obviously change the future of work. If it's only by the nature of people having actually access to technology, having access to education, and having actually the finances to start and run businesses. We have political uncertainty. I think we all know about that now. But it does have an impact on the future of work. It changes kind of investment patterns, but it mainly changes the mobility between people. We come from a very globalized world in which people kind of can easily move around. This might actually change in the future. Of course, technological change, automation, artificial intelligence, connectivity, all these type of things will change our world. Globalization is a big driver. We've been in a world where globalization has opened up so many opportunities, have reshaped value chains and where we can work and how we can work. In the future, a lot of people say we might be at the peak of globalization. It's kind of a new thing going on, and we're not really sure where this is ending up. But it will also impact, obviously, the mobility. But also, it matters a lot, because a lot of the future of work we talk about is about services. And services don't trade that well as manufactured products. So that will have an impact. And then we have, of course, the demographic change. We know people are getting older. There's all these age-related entitlements. We're in France, it's very topical. So we have all these entitlements that might go away in the future, who knows? We have all the millennials coming up. How they will actually consume will change kind of what we buy and thus the nature of work. We have women in the workforce, a lot more women in the workforce, and although things are going slower than we want to, there is this big boat going on for the moment that more and more women will be in the workforce, and we're getting better educated on average, right? So all these type of things actually lead us to know a couple of things about the future. By the way, if you haven't read this thing about from Nesta, I would suggest you do it. It's a study that came out last week about the future of work. And they don't just take into account automation, they take into account all these drivers. And what they're saying is, like, if you look at everyone who's working now, their occupations, there's 10% of those occupations that will increase, right? Where the market will be bigger, which are teachers, obviously. More people need to get educated and re-educated and reschooled. There's the engineers, but there's also the construction workers with the urbanization. There's business. Luckily, there's still business for us. You have personal care, healthcare. The public sector will still have a lot of demand for jobs because they will resist more technology and management functions. Then they say there's 20% that will shrink of occupations. So if you're in those type of businesses, you're not doing well for the future. Like everything which is clerks and salespeople, etc., right? And transportation workers. But actually 70% of the jobs, as we currently know them, we have no clue. We don't know whether they're going to grow, whether they're going to need to be redesigned, whether they're going to decline. So the uncertainty about what we're going to be doing in the future is huge. What we also know about the future is that work will be very different. We'll start more talking about livelihood than about jobs. Still a lot of people talk about jobs, certainly in policy areas. But it's more, the future is going to be about livelihood, being able to gain enough money to support your family and your needs, etc. And that might not go with a steady job. We'll have a coexistence of 5 generations in the workplace. It will be 75% millennials, but there will be 5 generations. The time that, you know, the kids were in school, the parents who were working, and the grandparents who were retired, that's kind of going to be over, right? We'll see a lot more. We already see a trend going on, a lot more flexible work, as they say, right? Either part-time, the gig economy, self-employed, temporary. These type of contracts are already tremendously trending now, for good and for bad reasons. Lifelong learning will be necessary. Given we're getting older and everything is changing around us, we're going to need to relearn. No more, I went to school and I'm fine for the rest of my life until my retirement, right? We will be able to probably work anywhere because we can work from home a lot more and these type of things. But the one thing I think is important is that the market will become more competitive with just more people, and if on average the number of jobs or employment opportunities or livelihood opportunities doesn't grow as much as demographics grow, it's just going to get very competitive. And I don't know if you already feel that, but it's certainly more than 20 years ago. The skills you're going to need to have are, as you can imagine, interpersonal social skills, relating to each other, communicating to each other. What they call high-order cognitive skills, kind of being able to play with ideas, seeing new ideas, being able to learn, have some originality. System skills, because you need to now learn to make decisions with complexity, so you need to understand how systems work, right? That's where women have a good advantage, actually. We think in systems, it's been proven. We're gonna need to be more adaptable or resilient. Given we're gonna lose our jobs every 5 minutes, we're gonna need to have a plan. No more long-term employment, right? So we can better be very curious and have some initiative and persistence. There's still a need for literacy, obviously, right? That's always gonna be there, but I think one of the most important things is that we're gonna need to learn to be entrepreneurial. If we're gonna go for livelihood rather than a job, it's gonna be more important to learn to sell your stuff than to once get into a job and wait for 20 years to go by, right? So entrepreneurship is gonna be very important. And then there's the last element of how the future will change, it's the desires. What are people looking for in jobs or in livelihoods, in economic activity? Jobs will always, and have always been, and that's a basic human need, will always be needed. You know, they say like, we're all gonna sit on the beach, that's just not gonna happen, I think. Because jobs or livelihood gives you an identity. It's about who you are, in some kind of way, how people define themselves. It gives you self-respect and money. But what is, that is a given, I think. But what is gonna change is that we see that these millennials want more. You're some of them. You want higher purpose and impact. Having some kind of, it's more than about the money. You want to do things together, and the quality of people you work with are important. And that's not just because you like to work with nice people, we all like that. But the way the millennials think is like, it needs to be people who are gonna help me grow and advance, right? So they want growth. They want people to have or occupations that give them growth, which makes sense because life is gonna be long. And they want freedom, independence. They're open to change. They're very likely to change jobs very often. And they want flexibility, no more 9 to 5. So this decreases tremendously, obviously, the hierarchical type of management you might think of. And then something else that they want is they do still want seniority and compensation. That doesn't change, but it's not through the corporate ladder. And I was trying to find a word for that, so I found only like climbing web. You know, when the kids go up, you know, the kids play on these things where you kind of, you want to make it trace your own ladder. You still want to go to the top, but the way you go there is not on a straight ladder anymore. You want to go on a climbing web, right? And figure it out yourself. That's freedom, right? So these are a bit the things that we're going to see in the future. It's not exactly where we're living now, and it's not exactly where we've been living in the last 20 years for the people who, you know, are a bit older than like me. So this is kind of the picture I wanted to depict you very shortly in what is that future workplace gonna look like. But these are things that are kind of coming at us, I would say. You know, this is like shaped by drivers and shaped by kind of desires, etc. At the same time, the future is not just happening to us, right? The future is also being shaped very strongly for the moment on the future of work. And I would like to invite my two colleagues here for this session to talk a bit about how they are shaping, why they are shaping, and how they are shaping the future of work. And so, Jane, maybe you can give a bit of a background on what you're doing with 100% human initiative and all these other great things you're doing.
Great. Thank you, Crystal, very much. And I have a very long career because I'm actually have been around for a very long time, very old. So that's hence why there's so many things that I've done over the years. You know, and also, I guess, living in America right now, to say political uncertainty is probably the biggest understatement of our lives right now with what's happening there. And I feel like, though, that this is probably one of the most exciting times for all of us to be alive in this room. It's almost as if someone has hit a big red disruption button on the wall, which is causing all these positive and negative disruptions around the world. But I think the most beautiful thing about that button being hit is that people around the world now are starting to realize that the systems that we've built over the last several decades are broken and they need to be fixed. And what an exciting time for all of us in this room to be alive, to help rebuild those systems and re-engineer those systems in a way that is human. And I think this discussion we're having is so exciting because there's a real question around will there be leaders? What is leadership within this new world order right now? So I think this next hour is going to be so exciting to really dig into that. But before we do that, I'd want to ask just everyone just to shut your eyes for a second. And I know it's just after lunch, so don't fall asleep. But I just want you to think about a 100% human company in your life, either one you've worked for or one you've heard about. So what company comes to mind when you think about 100% human? And then I'm just going to ask one or two of you to share. Okay, you can come back now. Is anyone willing to share what came to their mind when they thought about 100% human company? Anyone?
Anyone had one?
Has anyone worked in one? Has anyone worked for a company or seen a company that's not been 100% human, and why? Okay, there's lots of hands around the room there. Here you go. Your hand was up, so you have to answer. Also, because you're one of the 3 men, too.
So you want me to answer why I put my hand up to I've worked for companies that are not 100% human?
So what makes a company not?
Well, basically when the focus is on, kind of the financials, the corporate investor, must-haves kind of thing, and not thinking about the people first. So organizations that are built from their people that then serve the customers, that then serve the shareholders seems to me a better model. But in the past, it's normally been the shareholders, the management, and then, the poor employee at the bottom sort of thing. So I've seen quite a few organizations like that. That's why I stuck my hand up.
Great, thank you. Thank you for being brave and sticking your hand up. Anyone else have a thought either on a 100% human at work company that they've seen in the world or one that's not 100% human? And why? Any thoughts?
Yeah. I would just share that I couldn't think of one, but I was thinking it differently than you. I wasn't thinking about the employees. I was thinking that the company is only employees, and without it's not technology, it's not other things. That's what I thought you meant by 100% human, so maybe I misunderstood.
No, I think that's what it comes down to, but we don't necessarily look at a company as just focused on the human beings, which is interesting. How many, just to raise your hands, I promise I won't call out on you this time. How many of you company came to mind right away when I said 100% human at work? How many of you immediately thought of one specific? Okay, great. And this is, and again, I promise, unless you want to talk, do you want to?
It's a bit different, but I started a company, so it feels probably more real and human than anything I've ever done before. So it was sort of more from that, I think, from my thinking on who the people are, the employees, but even the tech being built, that's all going to be inspired and driven by humans. So I don't think anything's ever felt so real before than starting something up.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And I think the great opportunity of starting something is that you have that chance to build it to be 100% human. And I think one of the things that we just saw in this room is that there's not many companies out there that fit that criteria. So we're going to explore a little bit about what does that mean to be a 100% human at work company. But before we do that, I thought I'd just introduce very briefly the B team. And to your point before, one of the reasons, probably about 8 years ago now, a group of business leaders came together to look at, because they started to realize that it's okay for Paul Pullman from Unilever to stand up on his own, for Mohammed Yunus to stand up on his own, for Francois-Henri Pignot to stand up on their own. But where the real power is going to come is how can they come together as a collective to really change the system and the way the world does business. So there's about 25 of them that have come together now, and they are really working on what are the types of systemic shifts that we need to move to a better way of doing business for people and the planet. And so when we were looking at what the B team was going to specifically do, one of the things that we kept on coming back to is it doesn't really matter if we change the structures if we're not taking care of our people and treating our people well in a company. So that's really where the idea of 100% human at work emerged from. And I'll just flip to, thank you, Crystal. There we go. The 100% human at work. And the reason we wanted to do 100% human at work really came down to 3 reasons. And one of the things was that we feel that probably the gravest danger in the world right now is really the lack of moral courage and the erosion of social values. And we're seeing that play out in the United States right now and seeing it play out in many countries. I was just in the UK at Cambridge University last year, and I was speaking at an event that was around students that were really focused on how you change the way business for the better of people. And a woman raised her hand, and she asked me a question about, can a leader really be a good leader and still be empathetic? And I had to take a step back because I never would have expected that question. And so I asked her why she asked me that question. And she said that she had just come from working in an investment bank, and they had done an analysis on the traits of leadership, and her boss had scored number 32 out of 33 on empathy, and they were celebrating. So again, it was just that reminder of how far away we are from actually putting humanity back into our businesses right now. So that was the number one reason is, again, we feel there's a huge opportunity because much of the behavior of bullying and of not having values begins in the workplace. So we felt strongly that how do we work with people in companies to change that? And then the second reason is because people want it. Like, how many people in this room don't want to work for a 100% human company? It's something that's almost common sense. Yet again, we're not delivering it. If you look at it, each one of us will spend 33% of our lifetime in the workplace. Yet today, a poll that Gallup did, 87% of people are disengaged. 87% in workplaces today. Just think of all that wasted resource and all that wasted purpose that people could have in their lives. And then we wonder why people feel disconnected and don't have a purpose and don't have a direction. It starts in the workplace, and we have to start thinking about how can we reignite that purpose in the workplace, and how can we help people find their paths. I always think about it as almost like a football field where you have all these coaches out in the world and all these leaders like the Paul Pullmans and others starting to stand up to say we have to solve these problems. You have all these fans, all of us around the world saying, yeah, we have to solve these problems, but what we don't have is the actual players on the field that are going to go make it happen. So again, 100% human at work is how can we start looking at companies as places of purpose and places where you not only find your individual purpose, but you support the wider purpose of what the company was doing. So that was a second reason. And really the third reason is simply that it's good for business. It makes sense for business. I'm sure many of you have seen right now the recent Edelman Trust study that came out. They interviewed 33,000 people in 28 countries. And what came out of that very, very clearly is that there's a huge crisis of trust right now. Only a little bit over 50% of people trust business and trust NGOs, and only 37% of people trust CEOs. 37%. So imagine again that potential for companies to think about how do we rebuild trust again, and how do we create a sense of meaning and belonging in a company? Because no matter what we do, unless we have trust at the heart of that, we're not going to be able to change the way companies operate. So that was the beginning of the genesis of why we created 100% Human at Work. And again, I'm really excited today to hear some of the views of what people think that needs to look like going forward. Today, thanks to Anna's hard work that I'm going to hand over to Anna in a second, we've got about 250 companies in the network that are all sharing experiments on how they can change their companies to make it more human. And it was really interesting because we did this big discussion around with these companies and with others around what is the foundation of a 100% Human at Work company. And what came up really clearly are those 5 things you see right now on the screen, which are respect, equality, growth, belonging, and purpose as platforms in organizations. But we'll talk a lot more about that in a minute. I am going to hand over to Anna, I think, right now, right? Is that okay?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Jin. So really about to let you get involved in the conversation and get everyone's voices in the room. But what I thought would be useful before we break out is to think we're understanding some of these drivers and some of the things that are changing. And so what are we seeing in the organisations we talk to around the world that they're actioning and doing differently in their organisations, and what then are some of the questions we need to think about as people who lead organisations or who want to lead organisations in the future? I think very much, as we referred to before, we're seeing flattening all over the place. So many organizations are getting rid of these management structures that are tiered and have multi-layers, and they're trying to push down autonomy in teams and give people more decision making, but that's challenging. That's really different. So managers and leaders who came up in an environment where it was very much command and control are going to have to think differently about how they approach leading those teams. We talk about lots of roles being automated, and the optimists in the world who don't think we're all going to be out of jobs with nothing to do talk about jobs becoming better. We get rid of the boring, dull ones, and we get to do ones that are innovative and creative and purposeful. And what does that mean that leaders need to get out of their teams? If 87% of people are disengaged, are they going to be innovative? Are they going to be creative? Or do leaders need to think of ways of leading organizations that's going to bring that from people and that's going to get their best brains thinking on it? We're also talking to other organizations, a company in the UK who have production lines, and the challenge they're facing in their workforce is that they're going to end up with staff who essentially will not interact with humans anymore. They will spend their day running a production line by themselves, interacting with machines. And what does that mean for leaders to create engagement in those people who are going to spend 8 hours a day not interacting with a human being at all? And how do they need to shape and lead their organization so that they don't drive everyone mad, which is what comes to my mind when I think about doing that all day. And if I think about, we talk about the different generations in the workforce, I think there's a lot of stereotypes around millennials. We had an interesting conversation with some last week and talk about flexibility and change and moving roles. And a lovely young woman I spoke to from America said this was the first point in her career where she'd had an option about that because she'd graduated university in the financial crisis. She didn't have the option of a stable long-term job, and now that she had it, she loved it. So I'm not sure I believe it all, but I do think that around purpose and engagement, there is something that the future generations are going to be asking for. And then if I think about what an organization looks like, that's going to be different. If I think we've got companies we work with who are completely distributed, they don't have an office, they have people all around the world. So you don't come into a Monday team meeting and that's your style of leadership. You've got to think about how you're engaging the person in Brazil and Namibia and London. And that's a completely different challenge that people haven't had before. So I think all these trends mean if people aren't thinking differently about how we lead and what it means to lead an organization, it's going to be very difficult to get what we need as organizations out of people for the future of jobs. We talk about more human skills, the creative and the innovative, and it's difficult to challenge that. So we now wanted to open it up to some workshops to see if we can dig into that a bit more.
Perfect, thank you. This is quite a challenging setup to do a workshop, though. So we're going to ask your contribution and your flexibility on this one. So what we wanted to talk about is, if you think about leadership, right? We've now been discussing kind of, how people want different things, how the workplace or demands on work or what we even call work is going to change, how organizations are already changing that, how desires are changing. If we think about leadership, and I've put just some kind of, because it's such a fluffy word, I've put just some definitions on there, is thinking about it as being leading a group or people, creating a vision, motivating other people or groups to achieve a goal. If that's how we think about leadership in this new world, so not in today, but in the new world we heard about, what does that mean in terms of the leaders that we need, and what would their role be? What do they look like? What skills and traits do they have? A second question we'd like you to discuss is, what will employees need? What type of leaders do organizations need, right? A third question we would like to propose to you is to say, what can women provide? Where can we have a competitive advantage, nearly, right, to this world? And a fourth question, what will be the biggest challenge of leaders in the future? What would they have to deal with to be a leader, right? What will they be challenged on, mostly, be looked at, right? And so what we're going to ask you to do is to form like little groups, very convenient. So we're going to ask you to form kind of little groups. I will just maybe go, like, to make it easy on everyone, kind of start to cut the room in pieces. And then just take one of those questions, agree on which question you want to talk about, one or two of those questions, and we'll let you talk around this with each other. And then we'll call on you, kind of to see on what are some of which questions you took and what kind of key insights do you want to share with the rest of the people. So we want to hear a bit from you. Kind of, if you think about that future, roll yourself, you know, rolling ourselves like out for 10, 15 years, not that far, we'll still be in the workforce. You know, what will leadership mean? Do we need any? If we need any, what do they look like? And what do they do? What is needed? Where can women play a role? And what are they going to be challenged with, right? So I'm going to call on on you on the groups and just give me one or two ideas. I know you've been discussing quite a lot, but just one or two things where you thought like, hadn't thought about that before. It was interesting. That challenged my thinking. Who wants to report a bit back, like one or two ideas, something that challenged your mind, something interesting that came out?
You just said leadership. Probably it should become
Leaders.
leadership. Because no, because we
Yes.
talked about a collaboration amongst different generations, between, you know, men, women, different culture, races, but also mental patterns, so neuro diversity as well. This will be extremely important for the future. Because what we, you know, discussed a bit about, for instance, the millennial generation, they need a lot of feedback. They probably will like more the human skills or the talking skills that the other generations probably know better, but they're probably more into technology. So that's why enrich yourself with different generations.
Which is going to be a challenge in the future, because if that's more important, empathy is going down with tablets and stuff like that, as we know.
We also talk about leadership in general in all sectors, not just in business, and probably are the same characteristics that we need in government and in the civil society organization as well, not just in business. And we discussed then maybe in other periods that different depends where you need different skills, but I think the world now, we were discussing that maybe there's certain pattern characteristics that we need in the whole sectors as well.
So it would be different whether you work in the private or the public, or the same?
We said that they would be the same.
Yeah.
But when you were explaining, when we read the question, that was just applied for the business, and then we just opened a bigger discussion.
Yeah, you were thinking business, but it applies to everyone. Yeah. What have you been talking about, and anything interesting that came out? Any
We've been talking about the second question, what type of leaders will employees need? Well, we've got a superman or woman, and we've listed a few of the characteristics. He or she should be flexible, dynamic, a risk taker, multi-competent, should inspire 5 generations, which is not easy, and he should be a visionary, work more bottom up, good communicator, but also a listener, should be connected with the environment, emotional intelligent, should be a decision maker and dare to change.
So what do you think is going to be most important but complicated?
The inspiration for 5 generations, I think.
Connecting with all these different value systems and people.
Yeah.
Thank you. What have you been talking about? I heard some of the conversation.
Well, we were talking about that probably it's not going to be such a hierarchy into the organization, but probably a group of people that is working together more as a network that share a purpose. And the challenges that come from that, and we were talking about that, is that in larger corporations, probably in startups or small groups, it's easy to have shared values or to have this shared sense of purpose. But I think one of the challenges that we're going to face is for larger corporations in which there's one purpose probably, but they have different environments, for example, because they have operations in different countries, which has cultural differences, and how to make those groups interact into one common purpose for a company. So I think that's one of the most challenging things, and as well, we share that empathy will be one of the biggest traits that probably will be needed. The ability to work with people from other cultures and to understand that probably the purpose maybe shift a little bit, but we will need to have a common sense, and as well how to achieve consensus in a world in which probably we don't have a hierarchy model. That would be a challenging way of how to shift work and how to achieve, how to make a decision into a world in which we don't have like a leader figure as we currently have.
Herding cats. Thank you. So it's going to get a lot more complex if not someone is just like one steering the boat and so many skippers on the boat. It's going to get very complicated, or a lot of small boats having to go in the same direction. Yeah. Decision making will be? Yes, hard.
Their own opinion, and they want to have their own ideas. And when the leader, they want to decide on what is the best one. That's really the complex thing.
Yeah, how to get
So
any
they are not the
decisions
order
made in
takers
the end.
anymore, so
Like, keeping everyone happy on one side and still getting stuff done, right? It's going to be a challenge, a trade-off somewhere. What did you talk about? The group that was here. Any insights on, wow, that's going to be different in the future than it is today?
Yeah, so we spoke a lot about the third question about the particular attributes that are going to be needed. One of the things we were speaking about is that you've got to have like the courage to be yourself and got to dare to change. You know, it's not easy sometimes. You know, as things are changing, if you need to leave early, the rest of the group's working late. You know, do you fit in with the rest of the group, or do you dare to change? And one of the attributes we thought that women leaders will provide in the future is this kind of mutual care within a team. So having that empathy, looking at the team holistically and bringing that care element to like being the 100% human. And we thought that that's one of the particular attributes that women will be able to bring.
Yeah. Great. What did you talk about? What is new about future leadership skills or people, or
So
do we have leaders?
Yeah. Well, we talked about that first question. Do we need leaders, and what would their role be? So we kind of started with, do we need leaders? And we all said yes in some way, but not the way they are today. And we didn't go to the group leadership. We went more to leaders can be anyone. It's not hierarchy. It's not like, oh, you have to go to be a manager and manage people, and then eventually you can lead. Leaders can be at any age group, any level, anything. They will emerge. They emerge and take a purpose, we said, within a corporation. We were talking mostly about business, but not everything. We talked about school too, and education, and how that would have to change for this to be the future. And the type of traits and skills we mentioned, influencing and things, but they would probably be the same that exist in leaders today, except that we're not training them to be something that they're not good at, because the people who are leaders will actually own it and come up. So and people will follow them, because if you're actually have a purpose and a natural tendency to lead, and people like to follow that. Usually they go in a direction to support you. So we talked more holistically about the need for leaders, but a very different mindset. We talked a little bit about human resources and the misnomer and misunderstanding that could have when you think about 100% human, but it's not really about, that's not really what it's all about. And that someone asked, like, what would you do? And would you change human resources departments within companies? And I said yes. Others said, you know, it's the job of the leaders to make the drive for the change. So I think that kind of conversation could be beneficial. And the last interesting thing I pointed out was someone said something about the CEO and the leadership team of companies, and are they really needed? And someone said, well, how about going to the board? I think that was you. But so the question is, it's like a whole different way to run a company. If you want to address all the things that you threw in our face, because that's a lot of things. If we stay traditional in the way we do this, those leaders won't be as successful.
Well, you can have different philosophies about what I'm hearing. I mean, also listening to some of the conversations, you have different philosophies of change and how do you become a leader, right? And I think most of us got raised into the hierarchical model. And even if you want to be empathetic and all these type of things, that's not exactly how you made your career, right? And so people tend, I think it was 15 years ago, I was trying to change stuff. And I think I'm millennium sometimes. And someone told me, Crystal, you need to realize, you don't change the system changes you, or you get expelled from the system, and then you won't change the system either. So you have a choice to make. I made my choice. I stayed in the organization, and I thought I'll do baby steps, not to get thrown out, but still to change. But there's a stance to have about this, actually, right? So, because I heard a conversation there, like, can we have empathy and at the same time be a leader and achieve things? I think you can. I think we define who we are and where we live and what we do and our value system. And then the question is, then everything, if you're a leader, everything lines up around you kind of a thing, right? You change the things from the inside. So what we want to talk about is to take more the proactive stance, the idea that, we don't have to deal with what comes at us, but we're actually change makers. We can actually change systems. And you can do it with baby steps. You don't have to rock the boat immediately. But you can, if a lot of people start to change small things, then in the end, it's a big revolution, right? Or evolution. So what we would like you to identify is, now that we've been looking a bit at, what are these new leaders supposed to do, and who are they, and what can they do, and do we even need any of those? We want you to think a bit about, if that's the world of leadership, if we want to change the world of leadership into something that is more empathetic, more a driver of change, bringing more contribution, being more human, helping more people, have a nice life also in these 30% that they work, what can we do now? What are some of these small actions that we can start, each of us, to do to change the world into something that we think is a better place to be, right? So what are some of those tools that we can develop to help leaders? Or you can think about it to make sure I'm a good leader and that I'll be competitive in the market, because when I'm there and I can be a leader, I can change things. What can we start doing now actually to prepare for the future? Whether you think about it from what am I going to do, or whether you think about it from what can I do in my organization, or what can I put in place, which tools can I put in place to help the lives of people who are leaderless, so the people who are in the gig economy, temporary employment, entrepreneurs, etc., right? So we'd like you to think a bit about what is your big dare. Meaning you walking out of here, And as of tomorrow, well, tomorrow we're still here having fun. So as of Monday, what are you going to start doing to either personally prepare to do something within your organization that helps leaders become good leaders for the future, or to put in place tools that help other people that do not have specifically leaders in the future to still have a prosperous life, okay? What's your one big dare? What are you going to do to prepare for the future, to make this desired future happen? Okay? So we're going to let you talk a bit. Maybe take smaller groups, because we have also less time. Maybe sit together with 3-4 people around you And then we'll call on some of the people who are strongly feeling they're going to do something else on Monday that is going to make an amazing impact in everyone's life. Okay? I'll let you talk. We're looking forward to amazing ideas about how you're going to change the world into a human workplace and to be amazing leaders. Okay? And all ideas are completely crazy because before they have actually been implemented. So anything goes here, okay? Make up for yourself the one thing you're gonna change or you're gonna put in motion as of Monday. The one thing that you're gonna do to make sure that your organization, yourself, the people around you, or for someone else, you're going to make your company or wherever you work, your professional environment, more human. The one there. For yourself. Note it. Whether it's something that you're going to change in yourself, some tools or processes you're going to change. One thing. You all made a mental note of it? That's commitment to yourself, right? So can I hear some of the things? Who has something they want to share that they think are going to make, in the future, life around them more human?
I was just reflecting on the fact that I think quite a lot of us have a lot of fears about the future. You know, you talked about lack of empathy because we're using tablets, and we talk about a lack of collaboration. And I was just saying, what we need to do is be more bold and accept that we shape the future, and we shouldn't just be reacting to these things. We should be very courageous and actually say, no, this is not going to be the future for my children and my grandchildren. We're going to proactively shape what that looks like.
So what are you changing on Monday?
So
For children.
It's a reason I only let them an hour on tablet, on any type of screen a day, because it decreases empathy and it's a major skill for the future. Yeah?
So I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think it's about engaging more. So rather than when we're talking about AI or all these different things, sort of thinking, what is that going to mean?
Go and see people and talk with them.
Actually engage in the conversation and be more bold about what we want for the future.
Great. Someone else?
Yes, I have a macro.
So, given that there aren't many men here, I thought one of the things that I could do is engage other men on Monday and really, well,
you mean firstly, what you will do.
relate to them what a fabulous missed opportunity they had to be here in Paris with all of you amazing women, but also start to understand more about why men struggle with some of this, because they're going to need to adapt to this new world, and it's going to be more, I think, based on feminine competencies going forward. So, you know, how are men going to react? How are men going to change? How are they going to help shape the world of the future?
Yeah.
Well, we were discussing here about being more inspiring, more empathetic, having a bigger capacity to deal with all generations. And Xiao here asked, that's a very nice list of intentions, but how do you measure it? Do you have any KPI to measure it? So I think that on Monday, I'm going to have a team design a KPI to have leaders be judged on those sort of capacities.
Yeah, that's very concrete, fantastic.
Yes, I'm here. So I work in an organization where the governance and the board is extremely male-dominated. And at the moment, I have the opportunity to hire some new people, so I will make sure there are some talented young women joining the team, and it will
fantastic
really help
Super.
Drive the change.
I just want to revert to what we spoke before, but about the leaders, and what skills and behaviors leaders should have, but in the end, we had a great list, and we realized that we started to love, do you know the person in reality? So we should be realistic, and I believe we shouldn't shape any stereotypes how leaders should look like, because in different, I would say, areas we need to have different leaders. So I would say my goal would be to have the perfect mix of different kind of leaders in the team.
Pay attention to diversity, not just gender, I suppose. So, someone there?
Sorry for my English, but
I bet you're French. All the French say that.
I'm psychologist, so I think one good thing that everybody can begin on Monday is therapy. I think, yes, it's self-knowledge, then empathy is the basic, yes.
Relating to others, yes, what will you do? Yeah, go ahead. What are you going to do on Monday?
So I just mentioned that my company relies a lot on numbers, and we have a lot of managers who were very good at managing their P&L, and then one day they manage 10 people's P&L, and then one day they manage 100 people's P&L. So they're like P&L masters, but they don't know anything about people. And so I was like, I think what I would I'm trying to think about how to push this in my company, and I'll do this on Monday, is how do we get rid of quarterly reporting? Because I think if we get rid of quarterly reporting, then suddenly they won't have to be able to measure their P&L the same way, and then they'll have a lot of free time to think about other ways to manage performance.
Great. Good luck with that one. You need to have a vision and dare. It's a dare.
So I think I think for me, we were kind of chatting about dare, and I love dare, but I can get comfortable with the idea of bravery a lot better. And I think for me, around with the metrics and the measuring is refocusing our OKRs internally, so our objectives and key results, all about what would help you become braver and the ingredients and what can we then provide as a company. So really open myself up as to where my vulnerabilities are as a leader, but then feed in and have a very open discussion with the whole team about it, because we're still small enough that we can do that.
Anyone else? Great plans? We're on time?
Maybe, yeah. No?
Perfect. Just want to remind you, you can do small things. You have an area. If you can change your company, you can change your teams. Just asking people to stop responding to each other by emails and go and talk to people, for example. Small things. Okay, well, we would really, really like to thank you for coming here, for engaging so nicely with each other, for the flexibility that you've shown. And, well, we'll meet each other and run around in the same conference for the next 2 days, so hopefully we can have other chats with all of us. Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much, Jane.